Awesome. Perfect. Hey there, it's Natalie. It's all speechy, and we have Allie Reed here to talk about individuals with aphasia as well as focusing on quality of life. Welcome, Allie.
Hi, Natalie. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Um, Allie and I were just kind of talking beforehand, planning the episode, and I think we're going to have a lot of great information, great resources for individuals. Just across all platforms. And I think it's super exciting. So Allie, kind of tell us like how you got here, like what you're doing now, kind of your story.
Yeah, absolutely. So I originally went into speech thinking I wanted to work with kids. I was
Mm-hmm.
going to be a school-based SLP or focusing on autism. My mom was a teacher, and so I think I kind of saw it from that side. And in my very first speech class in undergrad, the professor showed a video of a bunch of different disorders, but specifically showed an aphasia video, and
Mm-hmm.
it was total light bulb moment. This is it. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life, and I've been completely obsessed ever since. So I got my bachelor's and master's, obviously, and then I started working in outpatient. I got my C's through outpatient private practice, and then mostly worked in acute care until recently when I started working for Lingraphica, which is a company that creates speech generating devices for people with aphasia. And we
Okay.
also have a really cool program called Virtual Connections, which is the program that I manage now.
Awesome, awesome. That's amazing. So kind of for like the new SLPs or those that are in school, like what is aphasia? Like what is kind of the definition?
Sure, yeah. So aphasia is an acquired language disorder, typically, most often by stroke, but it can be caused by traumatic brain injury, brain tumor, or a neurodegenerative process. But typically, it's stroke. So it's damage to left side of the brain. Is in most population is on the left side of the brain is the language center of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
So damage to the language centers of the brain is what causes aphasia. And of course, the types of aphasia vary, the severity varies, but that's really what aphasia is damage to that left side.
Yeah, yeah, that's one thing too. Like when you learn in grad school, like there's so many different, like you can have, yeah, a certain type of aphasia, and then there's the severity of that, and like
Yeah,
even if someone has Broca's aphasia, like they can look so different between each other
totally.
too, and it's that's like one of the neat things about our field is like you're
Yeah,
constantly learning, even though you're like, oh, I know this disorder, I know exactly what to do. You still show up and you're like, wait a second. Now there's still
exactly.
like
Yeah,
something else I need to do.
yeah, and I think that's something that you discover when you start working with patients. I'm a neuro nerd, so I always think about, neuro patients first, but, no one fits perfectly in the little Broca's box or the,
Mm-hmm.
global box or whatever. Everybody's brain is different. No two strokes are the same and no two aphasias are the same. So
Oh
it's
yeah.
definitely a challenge.
Yeah, I remember like pulling out like right after graduation. I'm like, okay, like pull out the aphasia notes. I have like my slides that'd be like, oh, here are the 5 common things, and it's like it's
Yeah.
never.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody's so different.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. So yeah, kind of going into that, like what are some different types of aphasia that someone might come into contact with?
Yeah, so aphasia is broken into two main categories, which is fluent and non-fluent.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the most commonly, thought of non-fluent aphasia is Broca's aphasia, or global. Either one are pretty well known.
Mm-hmm.
But this is where you're going to see that broken speech. So, the word finding difficulties, the halting, just the difficulty with getting those words out. These
Mm-hmm.
people will often say, oh, I know what I want to say, but I just can't say it. Or it's
Mm-hmm.
on the tip of my tongue, that sensation of, dang it, I know what I want to say, but I can't get the word out. So
Yep.
that's the more non-fluent side. And then the other category is fluent. And these are really, really challenging. This category holds the Wernicke's aphasia, which is probably the best known of this category. But fluent aphasia are really tough to rehabilitate because they lack that comprehension. Mm-hmm. So not just understanding language, but also being able to comprehend their own language. So this is where you will get patients where you're talking to them and they're not able to follow any commands. They're not able to answer any yes/no questions. It's as if I'm speaking to them in a different language, or they kind of speak in what I call a word salad. So it's just coming out word after word, sentence after sentence, and there's really no context. There's really no meaning there, and it's just because the comprehension center is damaged. So yeah, I think those are the most well known are Broca's and Wernicke's.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like I had one of my graduate placements was in an intensive aphasia program, and I had two individuals at a time, and I actually had one that was fluent and one that was non-fluent. So like I had to go between like the two and like readjust. And like my non-fluent individual, like she like for lack of better terms, it was more like hand holding, just kind of like walking her through emotions. And because like she was having a lot of difficulty with just not understanding and like not understanding what she's trying to say. And like like you said, it was just really hard to get into conversation with her because she would just get so frustrated and like be crying. And then my other guy, like, of course, he's frustrated too because again, like he's like, I know the word. And like we were able to figure out like writing was really big for him. So like as long as he had a pencil and paper, he'd do the first 2 or 3 letters of the word and then it would come. And he's always like, like, of course, like that's how I get it. And I think he was trying to get rid of it too. And it's like, no, just like be happy like you're coming up with the words. Like you've found that area that can give you that language. And just really like supporting them in that too, because it's hard.
It is so hard. Oh my gosh, it is just like such a depressing and isolating and challenging disorder. I mean, it's just absolutely devastating to a person's life. And I think that's a great thing to tell them is, hey, your language might not be 100% perfect back to normal, but let's make it functional. Let's find what you can do. That's the most important thing.
Oh gosh, yeah. So now going in, I know we're going to talk about aphasia as well as like quality of life. So kind of what is quality of life?
Yeah, absolutely. So quality of life, I think, is, just your general satisfaction that you have with your life, with your state of being right now. How happy or unhappy are you with your day to day? I think that's how I like to look at quality of life.
And then like how with the patients that you've seen, because obviously you see a lot of them and you focus on like their quality of life in your sessions. How have you seen like that like quality of life be affected by aphasia?
Absolutely, yeah. So it's devastating. I mean, it's a complete life-changing disorder. And I often say that aphasia doesn't just affect the person that has it; it affects the whole family, friend, social unit. If you think of it like a pebble in a pond, those ripples go out, and it affects everybody. So it can be devastating on quality of life. It often changes. You may have been working and now you can't work anymore. You may have been holding a certain role in your family. I'm the bill payer, I'm the breadwinner, I'm the caregiver for the kids. Whatever it may be, you can't be that person anymore. Or I was always a reader and now I can't read. It just changes the core of who you are. So it's huge for aphasia. It's quality of life.
Oh gosh, yeah. I had this same individual with Broca's aphasia. One of our activities that we would do like once a week, we would sit down and write out like scripts for him. So like when his sons would call and like update him on his life, like we would go through and be like, okay, like what do you want to talk to him about this week? And he's we'd get kind of to like, oh, there's a baseball game he wants to talk about. So then we'd be like, okay, baseball game. Now, what are some questions that we can ask that are like relevant to baseball? And like, I think that's, I mean, obviously it was an intensive aphasia program, so I saw him for many hours in
Yeah.
1 week, but I think that was the one activity that like he enjoyed so much. Like he's just like
Yeah.
so excited, and we would try to like imitate it too of like, okay, we're gonna try call him, like, and it was, oh, he's the cutest thing. I would still see him like out and about, because this was back in Minnesota and now I'm in Las
Okay.
Vegas,
Yeah.
and I happened to go back just like to visit one day, or a weekend, I guess. But I went out to eat with a friend, and it turns out like he was there like with his
Oh.
family, and they ended up like walking out the door, and I was like, what? So I was like, is that my old patient? And
Aw.
of course he's staying there, and then he kind of starts like crying. Like he did it every time he saw me, and it was the cutest thing. But he was just like crying, and they're like, oh my gosh, it's Natalie. And I was like, oh. Like, unfortunately, he wasn't in the aphasia in that program anymore. And I
Right.
think he was just doing a little bit of therapy because I think he just kind of reached his max.
Yeah.
Um, and it was just kind of burnt out. But
Absolutely. Yeah. But he's out of the restaurant. He's out
uh
with his
huh.
family. He's living life, and that's what
Yep.
it's all about. Don't let this. Even though it's very easy to let this completely tank your life,
Mm-hmm.
still get out there, still participate. Still engage in the world. That's what's going to
Yeah.
help your quality of life. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and that's how like family support is so big. Like having
Oh,
like that family that can go and like do these things, cuz I mean, like you said, like it takes a toll on everyone. Like it's not just
yeah.
oh, they're not feeling well, like I'm going to go do my own thing. It's like sometimes the environment has to change, like in the house, moving things around, or like putting them on a main floor versus like
Yeah.
upstairs in a different room or whatever it might be. Like there's a lot that goes on, and I mean like props to everybody that's
Oh my gosh.
like are the
That's so amazing.
caretakers and the families, because they do, I mean like I tell all of my families all the time, it's like you are the primary therapist, like you are doing so much more therapy at home than I do with them. So like, yeah, I might be great and I might be doing these activities, but I'm nothing compared to you. Like when you're doing these at
Exactly.
home, like you guys are the best like teachers. And
Yeah, and you know your loved one best. You know
mm-hmm.
what they're thinking or what they might be trying to say, and you know what their interests are. You know what they don't like. It's just they're instrumental. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
you can't work with someone with aphasia without working with their care partner. It doesn't work.
No.
Yeah.
It for sure does not. I've been in kind of
No.
both situations, and I'm like, it's so much better with the families and being able. And I think that's something I'm trying to do a lot in like my practice is be like, okay, we're very family forward, because like I said, I can only do so much. Like me seeing you for 60 minutes a week isn't going to change your life. But like if you
Yeah.
take the tools I give you in those 60 minutes and everyone provides it outside of that time, like that's where you see the big differences and like the improvements in the quality of life in these individuals.
Exactly. And that's what I always
Mm-hmm.
tell my patients too is, if you are trying to learn a new musical instrument and you only practice for 1 hour every week,
Yeah.
how quickly are you going to learn that musical instrument? Probably not very quickly, but if you
Mm-hmm.
practice, multiple times a day, you do a little bit here, a little bit there, you're meeting every couple of days. It's going to be improved much faster, much faster.
Oh gosh, yeah. Yeah, just like doing functional activities and making sure like it isn't like, I mean you can hear a lot of like, oh, the SLP sent home like flashcards for me to sift through and do. And it's like that can be good to do like 10 minutes a day, but it's a lot more functional to look at the items around and label them. And because then it's in their daily area, it's things that they commonly see. And I think that's one thing that makes it hard. Like in my program too, we did a lot of like worksheets, like here, do these worksheets and we'll see you tomorrow. And it's like, I think those are good in support, but I think it's so much better to make these things functional, and because the carryover is a lot easier. Like it's a lot easier to practice functional activities than it is to sit down and do 3 worksheets. Like,
Exactly. Yeah. and I
Mm-hmm.
mean that's the core of everything that I do with my job and with my second job and just the way that I approach aphasia in general is through the life participation approach to aphasia or
Mm-hmm.
LPAA, which is it's exactly that. It's applying language therapy and speech therapy to your everyday living. Participating in
Mm-hmm.
life, pairing that with language practice, and letting it go from there. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to do a worksheet.
No.
Like, I did worksheets in grade school. I'm not going to do it anymore.
Yeah.
Um, I want to go to a restaurant and talk with friends. Garden and name the gardening objects, or
Mm-hmm.
heck, just do the dishes and name the dishes you're putting away. It's
Yeah.
language is everywhere in our world, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't think speech therapy should just be in the therapy office.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So it's kind of going into like our next thing, like how your therapy sessions, like what is like an ideal therapy session look like? Like, are you providing therapy? Is it more, yeah, just providing those resources and telling them how to do it at home? Like, what does that look like for you in your job?
Yeah, I think all of the above. So, um, two things for this. But first of all, if I were to design like a perfect aphasia therapy session, obviously it would be person with aphasia and care partner in the room.
Mm-hmm.
We would talk about their goals. What do you want to do? What do you want to accomplish? Like, what do you want your language to look like? Developing goals around that and around what
Mm-hmm.
they want out of life.
Yeah.
And then doing those things, take them out of the office, doing something that's
Yeah.
actually real and functional that they can
Mm-hmm.
practice on. And then of course provide the resources and give the communication support strategies to the care partner so that they can support them at home as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I think that would be the main the way that I would design an aphasia session would be like that.
Okay. So when you're doing, let's see, like these functional activities, like do you have goals you're working towards? Like I know in graduate school we're like, okay, here are the three parts of a goal. Make sure you have all of this and like
Yeah.
you can measure it. Like do you have that with these functional activities or is it just like they're going to be able to go to the coffee shop and order? Like
Yeah. I think that you definitely should design a goal around this. If
Mhm.
the patient wants to be able to go to a coffee shop and order, but currently they're not able to get out, you know, even just one or two words.
Mhm.
Let's meet them where they are. Let's give them a communication board. Let's see about maybe a device in the future, or let's see if they can do the single word level and practice the scripting, or maybe get to the phrase level, or just kind of building up from where they're at. But definitely setting goals around that because that's what's important to them.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And I love that you said like AC device and like the
Yeah.
pictures PECs kind of um
Mm-hmm.
board too. I was gonna see because I've heard like very mixed things with like PECs versus device. Like some people are saying like let's forget about PECs and just go straight to device because it's a lot more, I don't know, lack of better terms, like functional, like bringing it
Mm-hmm.
around. What is your opinion? Like, how would you decide that someone would do best with a board versus someone that would do best with like an AC device?
Yeah. I think that it's, a big part of that, I would say, is technology.
Mm-hmm.
We're dealing, obviously strokes can happen at any age, aphasia can happen at any age, but
Mm-hmm.
obviously mostly is elderly, so they may not
Yeah.
be as comfortable with a super high tech device as others might be. Now, that's not to say they can't learn, of course, and be
Mm-hmm.
supported by the company and by a speech therapist through that process, but I
Yeah.
think it's just kind of different for everyone, and I'm a firm believer in all forms of communication are accepted here. So
Mm-hmm.
if you don't like a device, then let's break it down to a picture board, or writing or drawing or gesturing or whatever gets the
Yeah.
point across. I'll take it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think it just kind of depends on the person.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's one of like things that people think of like speech therapists. It's like, okay, we're coming here and like we need someone to talk. We need someone to verbally say something. When it's like, as speech therapists, like that shouldn't be something that we advocate. Like there's a lot of, I mean, I did early intervention. So I had the little birth to 3 kiddos, and probably 90% of them, I'd go in and the parents are like, they're not talking. So then it's, yeah, finding those different things like, oh, they gestured that they want water. Like, great, perfect. Like, oh, they're pointing to get something. Like, that's good. That means they're communicating. They have like the knowledge of like, I request, I receive.
Yes.
If it's something I should be getting. Um, so I'm like, that's a good thing to work off of. Like, we don't want to take away like that ability to be like, oh, I'm gonna point to get something. We don't want to like diminish that and be like, oh no, but you didn't say you wanted it, so you don't get it. Like,
exactly. Yeah, and
mm-hmm.
I think that I was just recently on a call with a person with aphasia, and he's pretty severe. I mean, if he gets a word or two out, it's to be celebrated. That's a really big thing for him.
Yeah.
But we were talking about, I think, proudest accomplishments or something like that, and he gestured, and I'm just going to explain what the gesture was. He just gestured like a steering wheel, and so he's moving his hands back and forth. And I said, "Oh, are you talking about driving again after your stroke?" And he was like, "Yes, yes, yes." He was so proud that, obviously proud that he can drive again after a stroke, but proud that he just gestured and we got it.
Yeah.
So it's good enough. That's what I say. Is not going to be perfect, but it's good enough.
Yeah, feel like as long as, and I mean, like you said, like families, they will get it like that. Like you can hear like one sound and they're like, oh, that means like this whole sentence. And you're sitting there like, are you that there? Like, it's like, geez Louise. Uh-huh. Oh gosh, yeah. But yeah. And it's like, obviously there's with quality of life, like we want them to be able to go and like do those activities they used to. Like I have in my dementia care facility right now, I was talking to this woman and her husband about like, okay, what are some things like, what are your goals with speech therapy? Like, and I think he's a little more like, we need speech therapy. And she's like, I don't even know what I'm doing. So we're still like walking through that. But I'm like, so what are your goals? Like, what's something that you want to do? And of course, the first thing they go to is like, I want to talk more. And I'm like, okay, well, let's like break that down. Like, what are some activities you want to do again? Or like, memory is really hard for her. So I'm like, do you want to complete a puzzle? Like, again, is that something you did? Or do you want to do an activity for 10 minutes and like perform, or like, not perform, but like be with like the other individuals in the facility doing an activity for 10 minutes? Like, what are kind of those goals that you want to do and that you want to work towards? And like, I'm here to help you with that. Like, I'm not here to, oh, okay, she has like 3,000 words, check, like send her off. Like,
exactly, yeah. And I think that's where LPAA is so important, and it's just such a, it's almost like common sense, but it's not. It's when we're in graduate school, we're taught the standardized assessments that translate into these, with 80% accuracy, given minimal visual cueing or phonemic cueing, whatever it is, goals, and it doesn't always translate into real life. And that was something that I learned in grad school. I had a tough supervisor, and I did a language assessment, and the goal that I was writing was, because this patient had trouble with repeating. And so I wrote the goal of, patient will repeat, I don't know, whatever the goal was. Patient will repeat, 5 out of 7 words, given minimal verbal cueing. And my supervisor just said, Allie, how often do you repeat what people say to you in the real world? And I was just like, oh my gosh, that is so true. You never do that, So why would I spend my time, their time, working on something that you don't even do in real life? So I think like looking at goals like that is the more important thing of, okay, standardized assessment says this, but does that actually translate into life?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And I feel like, even like I mean, I'm kind of new to the profession, so like I've been in school recently, and it's like they're still kind of teaching, like, okay, like one of the prompts is repeating and doing this, and
Mhm.
like you said, it's like how often, like I have one individual that's the only way she communicates is by repeat, like if I say something, she like repeats it back to me, and I'm like, okay, like that's not functional. Like it's not
Right.
like you can't just repeat everything. So now I'm kind of moving towards like, okay, let's make a PEX board for her and like see if that can get that communication out that isn't being repeated. I want that
Right.
spontaneous communication because great, she met the goal of repeating like sentences with 5 words, like wonderful.
Yeah.
But like
Yeah.
when is she going to like do that during the day? Like
Exactly. And
it's
that's the thing is, I not to say that standardized assessments don't have a place. They do. They give us a
mm-hmm.
lot of information. They are very helpful in diagnosing and for creating those initial goals. But, at the end of the day, can they have a conversation with their husband? Can they call their
Mm-hmm.
kids on the phone? Like, can they ask for a glass of water? Like, that's the stuff that we should be that
Yeah.
should be our long-term goal. That should be
Mm-hmm.
our guiding light is
Yep.
the functionality, not just 80% accuracy, blah blah blah. And
Yeah.
that doesn't, it's not life, it's not realistic. So I'm
Yeah.
a big functionality girl, if you couldn't tell.
Which I mean, I think as like our profession, like we should be moving towards that way, not just like
Totally.
the numbers. And I mean, I think that's a big thing in schools right now too, is I'm in a couple like SLP school Facebook groups, and they were like, we can't do like I had in a school I've been in, they were like, when you're doing speech, like speech sounds, you need to have 100 like that you're marking it out of. Like you need to have 100 trials for these kids. And it's like, I don't have the time, like the energy to
Mm-hmm.
like mark down all these 100 ticks to please you and like continue at that where it's like, can't it be like, oh, we read a book and they practiced their like sound in reading
Yeah.
30 times and
Right.
they got 80%. Like I'm celebrating that. Like
Right. Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's just functionality, and I know that
Mhm.
that contributes to motivation as well.
Mhm.
Like I said, I don't want to do a worksheet, but if I'm
Yeah.
doing something functional that I actually know why I'm doing it, and it's
Mhm.
working towards being able to have a conversation with my husband, or working towards calling my kids, or whatever, then I'm going to
Yeah.
be more motivated to participate. I'm going to want
Mhm.
to get better. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's all connected.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. So I'm going to so we have a couple like community questions that I'm just going to
Okay,
kind of throw your way.
sure.
And one of them with like evaluations. So like we said, there's standardized evaluations, there's like informal. When you're looking more like functionality, do you have like a separate evaluation that you do that like you found is super helpful, or is it more just like that conversation with them of okay, like what's like the biggest struggle right now in your life, what can we work towards, or how do you
Yeah.
do that in evaluations?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is a assessment for quality of life. It's just a rating scale, but it's the Stroke and Aphasia Quality of Life Scale,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just like that. They go down and they tick how much the aphasia is impacting whatever activity they're asking.
Yeah.
So that's something that I think would help to shape your therapy or help to shape your goals. Um, of course, asking the caregiver, kind of getting a picture of what day to day looks like. Where are we
Mm-hmm.
struggling the most, and how can I
Yeah.
help with that? And then, I think that I'm a big fan of the Western Aphasia Battery. I've done it a million times. I think that there is value in it for sure,
Yeah.
um, because it you can have a conversation with someone with aphasia and be like, why are they here? They seem pretty good, And then you get
Mm-hmm.
into some of those more specific language tasks, and you see the breakdowns. So I do
Mm-hmm.
think that there's of course value in that standardized assessment. I just don't think it should be the end of the assessment.
Yeah. Oh, for
Yeah.
sure. So with this is kind of leading into like insurance. So you do like your standardized assessment, you have, and maybe like you said, like maybe standardized assessment they blow it out of the park. Like, they can do these
Sure.
things, but once it's moving into the functional aspect, like, that's where the breakdown occurs. Um, like, how would insurance work with that? Like, will they provide support with that, or is this going to be more of like a, oh, sorry, they're not two standard deviations, like, we
Yeah.
can't see
Yeah.
them?
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's so tricky too. And it's,
Mm-hmm.
Medicare is so difficult in reimbursing therapy, specifically speech and PT, because they're in the same, amount per year.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that insurance is still that they want to see the numbers. They want to
Mm-hmm.
see the data. They want to see the accuracies for each goal, which is fine, as long as you can make that goal something that translates to something functional, not repeating. That wouldn't have helped anybody. So I'm glad that you guys have told me that. So
Yep. Oh, for sure. Do you see a difference with like insurance? I guess I don't know. With your job, do you do like group therapies, or are you more one on one with individuals?
yeah, so my job now is completely different. It's very interesting. I'm not clinical anymore for the first time, which is
Yeah.
really weird. But yeah, I manage a program that provides social conversation support groups online for people with aphasia. I was born out of COVID, and so
Mhm.
I do all group settings with people with aphasia now.
Nice, nice. And what's it
Yeah.
called?
It's called Virtual Connections.
Virtual
And
connections. Okay.
yeah, and we offer 3 to 4 sessions a day and on all different topics, and people from all over the world join. And so it's really a great resource, I think.
Nice. That's amazing. And is it all like online, or do you have some in person sessions
It is
too?
all online. Yeah, all of
Oh,
our
wow.
sessions are over Zoom. So we have over 3,000 members from all over the world
Oh,
that
wow.
will Zoom in. Yeah, so
Ah,
it's a very unique program.
that's amazing. So is
Yeah,
this something, because it wouldn't be like therapy then.
right.
It's just like a social communication place for these individuals to get together and be like, here's my experience, like,
Exactly.
and kind of
Yep.
get together with everyone.
Yeah, so we don't do evaluations. We don't set goals. Obviously, it's not therapy. It's an online support group is what it is, or it's
Yeah.
a online. We do music sessions and dance sessions, and it's just people with aphasia getting together with other people with aphasia and making friends and
Hmm.
talking and having fun. So it's great.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah,
Do they have to pay anything to be in these groups, or is it donation based?
it is completely 100% free. So
Yeah.
you can attend as many sessions as you want. You can rain or shine, we'll be there, and yeah, it's completely free.
Yeah. Ah, that's
Yeah,
amazing. What led you to like create the? I mean, obviously you said like COVID was probably a big thing with the online portion, but
yeah,
what made like the clinical transition, like from clinical to where you are now?
yeah. So I've been volunteering with a nonprofit organization called the Aphasia Recovery Connection since undergrad. I found them pretty much right away after I,
Mhm.
you know, started in speech, and they I was able to do online calls with people with aphasia. Even since undergrad, I've been doing this style of thing, of
Mhm.
these Zoom calls just to get together. And then fast forward 10 years or whatever it's been. And after COVID happened and there were support groups all over the country shutting down because of
Mhm.
lockdowns, Lingraphica and Aphasia Recovery Connection are partnered and they created this program. So it was in
Oh, wow.
response to COVID. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
so cool. I mean, I think there's a lot, obviously, like COVID wasn't a great time in everyone's lives. There's a lot of things
Totally.
that changed and fell through. But I mean, then you see things like this that are still going on and that were formed because of COVID. And like, would we
Yes.
have seen this if COVID wouldn't have happened? And to know
Exactly.
there's
And
3,000 members too, like, by golly.
it is, yeah. And it's just, if COVID had not happened, would they be meeting each other on Zoom?
Hmm.
Like we've got calls that are like 30, 40, 50 people. I mean, how would they have
Jeez
met that many
Louise.
other people if not
Yeah.
for something like this? So it's it's a really,
That's
really special
amazing.
program, and I definitely miss being clinical, but
Mm-hmm.
gosh, this is just I couldn't have a better job.
Yeah.
This is the coolest job. So yeah.
I think that's like, I mean, what you're saying super important too of like SLP is, and that's one thing that I struggled with coming out of grad school is like, okay, I have to go and like do something clinical. Like, where do I go? Am I peds? Am I adults? Am I hot? Like, where, what?
Yes.
And I, being a type A speech pathologist, like was
Uh-huh.
freaking out. Like, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know what my life, I'm, what would I be? Like 24. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Um, so like the fact that you have made a way and like yes you started clinical but like now you're finding all these other ways of like wow like I can still use my skills, I can still use my
Yes.
expertise and like help these individuals but not in the clinical way that I think, I mean right now SLPs like they're bogged down with the
Right.
clinical route, like it's really
Right.
hard like you said working with insurance when they're wanting all
Yep.
these numbers and we're trying to keep it more of like let's have functional sessions, let's
Yep.
focus on the individual, but then insurance is behind us saying you don't get
Sure.
paid unless you do X, Y, and Z for us. And
Yeah.
so I think that's really a great thing that you have found in doing kind of outside of that realm, but like you still get the joys and like you still have found a neat little corner of our career that
Exactly.
isn't super well known, but
Yeah. Yeah. That I couldn't have put it any better.
mhm.
It's so different, of course, but it's still so impactful, and it's making such a difference in these people's lives, even though I'm not, treating them one on one.
Yeah.
It's that quality of life. That's all it
Mm-hmm.
is. And so yeah, it's a great thing that I've been able to be a part of.
Yeah. And then something
Yeah.
with like the program I was in, we would have like back to back, we'd do like an individual session, and then we'd go and do group. And we would have, oh, what did we have? I think 5 or 6
Hmm.
individuals in this group. And like sometimes that was their favorite part. Or like in graduate school, like I had some aphasia groups. And just like the joy where like you see like these individuals connecting or like you know that Susie in the corner like has trouble with word finding and Mary next to her is like let's just let Susie think like oh let me help like write for her and I'm
Yes.
like my heart.
Yes. Oh, I love when they support each other. I love it because,
Yo.
aphasia is so isolating. And then when they get up there and they're like,
Mm-hmm.
take your time, it's okay, you're doing great. I'm like, yes, community. Yes.
Yep.
It's great. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite parts about like the one-on-one therapy was good, but like those, I mean, I had for one of my groups, we had to drive like an hour to get from like small town Minnesota to the city is to do
Okay.
it. And I'm like, I don't think there's many things that like I would do. Like obviously it's part of the school program to do it, but like I didn't get up every morning being like, oh my gosh, I have to drive an hour to do this group.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, like it's aphasia day. Like I get to go and see my group and
Yeah.
just, and we would usually have, I don't know if this is how you guys are set up, but we would usually have like kind of a topic like summer and then we'd have like 8 questions that we'd talk through of like what do you like to do in the summer, like what have you done this summer if it was a summer class or something,
Yeah.
just to kind of get to know them and like have them form, and everyone had like a speech therapy student and so we'd sit there with them be like okay like here's the one first question, let's come up with our answers so that once we're
Yeah.
sitting there expressing it they can confidently like say what they want to say and like
Yeah.
share their interests, share their desires and where they want to travel if that's somewhere they want to go somewhere in the summer or whatever it was.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
that's
very cool.
very similar to our sessions. We always have a topic, or a theme or something like that. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, our members just come on and you can share or you don't have to share. You can just,
Yeah.
observe or whatever. Or we
Mm-hmm.
do breakout rooms so they can chat in the smaller space.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
yeah, and it's just a really great program.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. Because I mean, like you said, there could be like 40, 50 people on here. And like to some
Hmm.
people, especially that are new or that have a recent diagnosis, like that can probably be a little overwhelming. Of like,
Absolutely.
wow. I mean, even me going into some like Zoom calls with
Yes.
40 people, I'm like, okay, mic off, camera off. Like, I don't know
Yeah.
how to participate,
Absolutely.
but how you guys have like the breakout sessions where it can be like those smaller groups where they can form those communities and those relationships is super important and like super wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's with everyone having aphasia and with us not doing, a screening or evaluation or anything, you got
Mm-hmm.
all levels in there. There's people
Yeah.
who can speak pretty well, and so trying to find that balance of
Mm-hmm.
not having someone doing all the talking, and then
Yeah.
having someone else who's a little bit more severe and they're just sitting there all by themselves, putting them in
Yeah.
the smaller groups, I think it makes it a lot more comfortable for them.
Oh gosh, for sure.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing your experience with them, and
Yeah.
I think that is a great opportunity. Do you know so like with these groups, is it one speech therapist that's there with these 40 people, or do you have different occupations? Like is there speech OT PT? Like how does that look?
Yeah, we do. So obviously, most of our sessions are run by volunteer SLPs or
Mm-hmm.
SLP grad students will volunteer a lot too. But we
Okay.
do have occupational therapists and music therapists, and I mean,
Yeah.
we even have some higher functioning people with aphasia facilitating these calls.
Ah,
And
that's awesome.
yeah, it's really really great. And so it's just a big variety, and that I think that's what keeps it really fun.
Oh, that's awesome, especially to see like these individuals that have gone through like therapy, have gone through these groups and can sit and advocate for it and
Totally.
feel like this made such an impact on my life. Like here I am to be in that process with other people. I think is just so empowering, and it's so good for these individuals that like yeah might have this recent diagnosis, and it's kind of that burden of like, oh my gosh, like what does my life look like now, and
Yeah.
to see like okay, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Like there are people that are so passionate about these groups and about this therapy and this life that like they're here with me, and like they can
Exactly.
understand, like speech therapists can understand to an extent of what you're going through. Like we know the textbook version, but like to really deeply understand the feelings that surround it, like we can really only sit there and be like, I bet it is hard. I've
Yes.
never experienced it, but I bet like you're having a really hard time and have that empathy. But we just can't know like these individuals do that have gone through the process themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah, they
Mm-hmm.
are the experts, and that's something that we always try to make known on virtual connections is,
Mm-hmm.
you all live it every day. I've just
Yeah.
learned it in a book and through experience, but
Mm-hmm.
no one knows it better than you do. And so, when we have a newbie on who is either fresh out from their stroke or TBI or whatever it may be, or someone who's just really struggling, I'll
Mm-hmm.
call in the other people, be like, all right, what strategies do we have for her? How can we give her some hope? How can we give her some
Yeah.
motivation? And they're all chiming in with better advice than I could give because they live it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just it's a great community, and I think it's really helpful, hopeful. It's a wonderful wonderful program.
Yeah, then I love that. Oh my gosh. I'm like trying to build my own little like aphasia group here in Las Vegas, but I love
Nice.
that like you're mentioning how like bringing everyone together and be like, okay, like what can we offer this person, instead of like the speech therapist standing there and be like, oh, try this, this, and this. Like you're bringing in everyone else. Where yeah, Susie might be like, oh, writing works for me. Like try writing it
Yeah.
down. Like and it would just probably mean so much more coming from this individual sitting next to you. Like, oh, that works for her. And like, she okay, like, let me try it. And
Exactly.
try, it might work, it might not. But I think then that's kind of our job too, is to like sit there and be like, okay, bummer summer, it didn't work. Well, let's try something else. Like, what does
Yes.
Bob do over there? Like, and really narrow down and just keep them upbeat and
Yeah.
knowing, like you said, quality of life, like just making sure that they have the quality of life that they should be, is just really, really important, especially with this population where it can feel probably very lonely if they don't
Totally.
have a lot of family, or maybe like they do have family, but like I had, oh gosh, I had one individual, and like he was very young. I think he was probably 35 ish when he had his stroke. So it's like he had a wife, he had kids, and it's like obviously dynamics all around changed, but like people can't drop everything and go on. Like the kids had to go off and do their things. Like the wife still had to work too, because now the husband can't. And
Right.
so I think in that situation too, it's just very difficult to get past that of being like, okay, now everyone else is living their life again, but like, what about mine? Where
Yeah.
these groups are so important to be like, it's coming. Like, we're going to figure
Yes.
out ways to, it might not be exactly how you saw it 2 years ago, but
Yeah.
we're going to find something where like you can go to bed at night and be like, wow, like I had a great day.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's not going to be the same. It's going to
Mm-hmm.
look different, but it can still be fulfilling. You can still have a beautiful life even with aphasia. It's just,
Yeah.
adjusting to it.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
Let me see. Is there any other questions we didn't target? Okay. What are some like functional activities with like word finding? So let's say someone is going like in the hospital setting or something where it's not, you're not at home, you can't label everything for them. Like how would you target word finding in like a functional manner?
Sure. Yeah. So if they're still in the hospital, it's obviously very early on, or if they're in the hospital later because something else happened.
Mm-hmm.
I think that from being in acute care, I would still focus on those functional words. So I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I need to use the restroom. Nurse, doctor, help, I'm in pain. Things like that would all be
Mm-hmm.
really, really the things to target in the immediacy. That's
Yeah.
that's the most important thing right now. Of course, scripting is super helpful. I used a
Mm-hmm.
lot of communication boards, just made
Yeah.
copies of communication boards in the hospital, and I think that all of that, it's just what's going to be the most functional for them today. And
Mm-hmm.
today they're in the hospital and they need to tell their doctor that their stomach hurts. So let's work
Yeah.
on that.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah. And like you said, like functional. We're making
Yep.
sure that wherever they're at, this is functional. Like
Yeah.
sitting and going over like, oh, this is a cup, this is a spoon. Like, okay, maybe
Yep.
those might be functional because they're eating with those.
Yeah.
But the going through like, oh, here's a zebra, here's a giraffe, like it's just
Exactly.
like, oh, okay. Like I
Unless,
was
yeah,
just gonna
unless
say,
they're on an African safari, that's not very functional. Yeah.
unless we're going through their pictures from their past and be like, oh look, you were hanging out with a
Yes.
giraffe. Like, let's get that word in. But
Yes.
yeah, I do like constant therapy. I
Mm-hmm.
have that app for some of my dementia care individuals, and
Great.
it's nice, but I mean, I think it definitely misses that functional aspect. So it's like even like everyday things, I'll go through and like be like, oh great, like this person does really well with everyday things. Let's pull this app up, and the app will just kind of bring up some random things of like, oh, you're reading through an email, like where's the phone number on here? And I'm like, I get the point of it, but like, when is this individual ever going to read an email? Like, so
True.
it's kind
Yeah.
of
That's
picking through, being like,
yeah.
okay, what's relevant to her right now, or like relevant to the goals that she had? Like, oh, she wants to go out to eat, so maybe we'll look more at menus. Like, obviously, she's not
Yeah.
looking at them right now when like the meals are planned for her, but kind of creating that. But it's hard, and it definitely takes a little bit of time too to really hone in on like what's important to the individual, finding those materials, because we want to individualize. We want to make sure
Yes.
that therapy isn't the same for everybody.
Right.
And so it'll take a little bit of time, but I think once you start implementing it and like see those improvements, like it just means the world to not only them, but to you too, of being like, oh my gosh, like look at them, like really achieving what they are like deserve to be achieving.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if
Mm-hmm.
their goal is to go back to work, and that's a, realistic goal,
Mm-hmm.
then that email task is a great task, but
Yep.
if they're in the hospital and they're still going to be in the hospital for another week and they can't say nurse, or they
Mm-hmm.
don't know where the call button is, or they don't know how to use the call button or whatever, then that's
Yeah.
more functional for today.
Oh, yeah. Oh, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Um, so what is the best part to you working with individuals with aphasia,
Oh goodness.
if you
Oh,
have
where
anything?
do I even start? Yeah. The best part is getting to know them, hearing their stories,
Mm-hmm.
learning about their lives. I think that's
Yeah.
personally why I like working with adults better. Nothing
Mm-hmm.
against peds therapists, but I love to hear their history and
Yeah.
where they've been and what they've
Mm-hmm.
done and what their kids do, and I just like that side of our jobs. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's one of the best parts, and of course, just how rewarding it can be. Like
Yeah.
when they get that word out, there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing like it. There's just
Yeah.
nothing like it. It's just like, I'm cheering and they're cheering and we're crying, and I was just like,
Yeah.
yeah, you did it. So there's just nothing like that.
Yeah. Yeah. The amount of times I've like cried during aphasia sessions, I'm like, I'm the therapist. I need to like hold it together. I'm like, nope, we're
Yeah.
gone. We're done.
Yeah. It's a really emotional specialty, I think. It
Mm-hmm.
really, I mean, of course, they all are. We're such an important field, but I think that, gosh, when they can get that word out, when they can say that thing, when they can do
Yeah.
that thing that they've been wanting to do, it's just to know that you were a part of that. It's just
Mm-hmm.
so touching.
Yeah. Being there to celebrate like those small accomplishments of like, oh my
Yes.
gosh, like you have been having so much trouble, like even coming up with your wife's name or whatever. And like
Yep.
now we've had it like 2 days straight. You've been able to call for her. Like, how exciting is that? Like, and just
Yeah.
seeing like their excitement and like just like the relationship change too of like, okay, like they're closer. They
Yes.
have more hope too of like, okay, things are working, things are changing, and what we're doing is right. Like,
Yes.
mm-hmm,
Absolutely. And I think that's a huge thing too, is celebrating the little victories. I
mm-hmm,
always tell my members, or in the past my patients, you had something devastating happen to you. And it does. It
mm-hmm,
changes everything. It's horrible. Language looks totally different now. Your relationships look totally different now.
yeah,
But if you got your wife's name out today,
yep,
take the win. Take the win. You did it.
mm-hmm,
You couldn't do it yesterday. Like, you're moving in the right direction, and to
yeah,
celebrate those little victories. You're right. That's where the hope comes.
mm-hmm. Oh,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
So with every episode, I want to focus on like an organization that means a lot to you. Is there anything that you want to highlight that we haven't talked
Yeah.
about already?
Yeah, I think the two that I work for are the ones that I would, of course, highlight. But Aphasia
Yeah.
Recovery Connection, their mission is to end the isolation of aphasia. It's a stroke
Mm-hmm.
survivor and his mom who started the organization, and
Oh,
now
wow.
they provided a ton of resources for people with aphasia and care partners. They have a few
Mm-hmm.
Facebook groups that are really helpful as well. So that's ARC is definitely one that I would recommend.
Yeah.
And the other one is my Graphica. I mean, we
Mm-hmm.
of course have the speech generating devices. That's what we're known for, I think. But we have so many other things too. We have apps for people with aphasia. We offer a
Mm-hmm.
ton of CEUs for SLPs that are all free, and then
Yeah.
virtual connections. I mean, it's just, I think both organizations just do so much for the aphasia world. So
Mm-hmm.
I can't not mention those two.
Yeah, and I mean they're both fantastic, and especially that they kind of encompass like the whole aphasia community. Like it's not, I mean, I love like when there are groups that, yeah, with this mom and this individual that went through recovery and like they're able to create something so fantastic with these resources for these families that may have helped them or that they have seen help other people. Like putting that together is really nice. But I think also supporting the SLPs in that role, because I think sometimes it can be just like emotionally challenging of like, oh my gosh, we've been trying the same thing, and like maybe their patient's just very frustrated through it all. And like, I mean, we, at least I take on like my patient's feelings all the time, and I'm like, I need to sometimes put that wall up. But it's also like if they're feeling frustrated, like I need to problem solve to readjust that. So having Lingraphica to provide those resources to SLPs too, and be like, here's how you can support them. Like they have these resources to be supported at home, but like here's how you can support them in that 1 hour a day you see them, or 1 hour a week, or whatever it might look like. But
yeah, absolutely, yeah, and the graphic is so great because our CEUs, we come at it from all different angles. We've got CEUs for the hospital setting, and we've got CEUs about just a variety of topics that all relate to aphasia and AAC. And so I think that's super helpful, especially for understanding aphasia better and the whole picture of a person with aphasia.
Yeah, those are both fantastic.
Yeah.
Are there any books you'd recommend to like SLPs that you have really kind of helped you through your career?
Yeah, absolutely. I love reading books about aphasia and strokes, and I've read a couple. So, Brain Attack by David Dow, which he's one of the founders of ARC. So that's a good one, and that's actually written aphasia friendly. So you could read that, or your patients could read that.
Oh wow,
so that's a
nice.
great one. Yeah. There's another book that is not really aphasia friendly, but a good book for SLPs. I believe it's called 100 Names for Love. And it's about these two writers, and one, they're married and the husband has a stroke. And it just talks about how, of course they're writers, like how devastating it is. And for their relationship too, like how their marriage and their love and their intimacy survives through this aphasia. So that's another great one for sure. So yeah, I think those are the main books that I would recommend just off the top of my head.
Those are amazing. Yeah, hearing and like going through those books of these individuals, like we said, we can't like know the experiences they go through because it's all individual. And but these books I feel like can be so helpful too, and like, okay, I have a little piece of an understanding of what's going on in their mind when I say label this picture, and like they can walk through and be like, this is what's happening. Like that's why I need 2 minutes to really process your question, is because I'm drawing from all these answers, or I'm blank and I don't know what to say. And like that's so important to be able to read. And it's also someone's story too, and just how empowering that is, and seeing how they overcome what they do.
Yeah, and it's reading about aphasia, but not from a textbook perspective. It's reading about how it actually affected their life and what their recovery felt like. Not what it necessarily looked like, or the symptoms, or whatever. So I think that those types of books give a really, really great perspective to the journey.
Oh, for sure. That's amazing. Well, thank you, Allie. Where can listeners find you?
Sure, yeah. So I'm on Facebook, Allie Reed, and I am all over ARC, of course, and I'm also on virtual connections all the time. They're welcome to email me, alliereedslp@gmail.com. And yeah, I think those are, and I'm on LinkedIn too. They can add me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming. This was a blast. I mean, I love being able to talk about, especially the functional aspect where it's like quality of life. Like we need to make sure that this is out there more, because I think everything can be a little bit textbook, but knowing that there's other routes and that are important to these individuals are really good to focus on.
Absolutely, yeah. It's definitely a passion of mine. I'm sure you could tell. But yeah, no. Thank you so much for having me. This has just been wonderful.
Yes, I love that. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.